I always knew those kids weren't mine. Do a DNA test now or it's divorce. The scream tore through the perfectly curated silence of our suburban living room, shattering the peace of a Sunday afternoon. My husband, Marcus, stood over me, his chest heaving, his eyes bulging with a rage I had never seen before. He wasn't just angry, he was possessed. In his hand, he gripped a crumpled piece of paper, a credit card bill, innocuous to anyone else, but apparently the match that had lit this powder keg. Before we unlock this medical mystery, if you believe that a mother's bond is the strongest force on earth, even when the DNA says otherwise, hit that subscribe button. You are going to want to see how this puzzle comes together. Now, let's get into the story. My name is Dr. Maya Akbara. I am a 40-year-old pediatric hematologist. I deal with blood, with genetics, and with the harsh realities of science every single day. I am a woman of logic. But as I looked at Marcus, the man I had been married to for 12 years, the man I had built a life with, logic failed me. Marcus, I said, my voice calm, trying to de-escalate the madness. What are you talking about? Look at them. I gestured to the backyard, where our twins, Leo and Zara, were playing tag. They were 10 years old. Leo had Marcus's broad shoulders and his easy, loping gait. Zara had his nose and his stubborn set of the jaw. They were, undeniably, his. And I had carried them. I had labored for 18 hours to bring them into this world. I had the stretch marks and the C-section scar to prove it. Don't you gaslight me, Maya. Marcus roared. He threw the paper at me. I see the way you look at your colleague, Dr. Eris. I see the late nights. And now this? A charge for a consultation at a fertility clinic? You're planning something. You've always been planning something. I looked at the bill. It was a charge for a routine cryopreservation fee for eggs I had frozen years ago, before we even conceived the twins via IVF. A backup plan we had agreed upon. But Marcus wasn't seeing reason. He was seeing ghosts. And sitting in the corner of the room, sipping her iced tea with the serenity of a viper, was his mother, Ms. Etta. I told you, Marcus, Ms. Etta crooned, her voice like molasses laced with arsenic. I told you from the start. She's too smart for her own good. And those babies, they don't have the Caldwell eyes. They never did. This was the hook. The moment the simmering tension of a decade of microaggressions boiled over into a declaration of war. Ms. Etta had never liked me. I was too educated, too independent, too uppity for her son. She had spent 12 years dripping poison into his ear, feeding his insecurities. Marcus, a successful but insecure car dealership owner, had always felt threatened by my medical degree. And today, the poison had finally taken hold. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a sharp, incredulous bark of sound. You want a DNA test? I asked, standing up. For children I gave birth to? Children we conceived together in a clinic? Marcus, do you hear yourself? I want the test, he yelled. And not just paternity. I want full maternity, too. I want to know if you even used your own eggs, or if you swapped them out to make sure you got your perfect genius babies with some other doctor. The accusation was so absurd, so scientifically illiterate, that I almost laughed again. But then I saw the look in his eyes. He was serious. He was looking for an out. He was looking for a reason to blow up our marriage, and he had latched onto this insanity as his exit strategy. Fine, I said, my voice turning to steel. You want a test? You'll get a test. But when the results come back, and they prove you are the father and I am the mother, I want an apology. And I want her, I pointed at Ms. Etta, out of my house. Permanently. Deal, Marcus sneered. But we go to a lab I choose. No medical friends. No favors. The next morning was a nightmare. We took Leo and Zara out of school. We told them it was for a routine wellness check. The confusion in their innocent eyes broke my heart. We drove to a private, high-end genetic testing facility across town. The technician swabbing their cheeks felt like a violation. Marcus watched me like a hawk, as if I might sleight of hand the swabs. He demanded a rush order. He paid extra for a 48-hour turnaround. The next 2 days were a cold war. Marcus slept in the guest room. Ms. Etta prowled the house, humming gospel hymns, looking at my furniture as if she were already deciding how to redecorate once I was kicked out. I wasn't worried about the results. I knew biology. I knew the truth. I was worried about my marriage. I was realizing that even a positive test wouldn't fix the rot in Marcus's soul. 48 hours later, the call came. Mrs. Caldwell? The voice on the phone was hesitant. It was the lab director, Dr. Stevens. Yes, I'm here. My husband is on the extension. We have the results, Dr. Stevens said. Could you both come in? Immediately? Just tell us. Marcus shouted into the phone. Is he the father? Mr. Caldwell, please, the doctor said. It's complicated. You need to come in. My stomach tightened. Complicated? There is no complicated in paternity. You are or you aren't. We drove to the clinic in silence. The air in the car was thick enough to choke on. We sat in Dr. Stevens' office. He was a gray-haired man, looking at a file on his desk with a furrowed brow. He looked up at us. He looked at Marcus. Then he looked at me. Well? Marcus demanded, leaning forward, practically vibrating with the anticipation of his victory. Tell her. Tell her those kids aren't mine. Dr. Stevens took a deep breath. Mr. Caldwell, the DNA test confirms, with 99.99% probability, that you are the biological father of Leo and Zara Caldwell. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. There, I said, looking at Marcus. Are you satisfied? You dragged our children through this for your ego. Marcus slumped back, looking deflated, but also, strangely angry. He had wanted to be wrong. He had wanted to be the victim. Ms. Etta, sitting in the corner, sucked her teeth. However, Dr. Stevens said. His voice was quieter now. He was looking directly at me. There is a distinct anomaly in the maternity results. I frowned. Anomaly? What do you mean? I carried them. I did IVF. They are my eggs. Dr. Stevens slid the paper across the desk. He looked pale. He looked shaken. Dr. Opera, he said, using my professional title. I know you are a hematologist. I know you understand the science. We ran the test 3 times. We used 3 different technicians. We thought it was a contamination error. What are you saying? I whispered. The results say that Marcus is the father, Dr. Stevens said. He paused. But the DNA confirms that you are not the mother. The room spun. What? I whispered. I laughed, I said, my mind flashing back to the argument. But that's impossible. I birthed them. According to this DNA, the doctor said, Leo and Zara are genetically related to Marcus. But they share 0 genetic markers with you. See? Marcus screamed, jumping to his feet, his face twisted in a triumphant, ugly sneer. I knew it. I knew it. You stole the eggs. You used a donor and didn't tell me. You fraud. You liar. Ms. Etta clapped her hands. Praise Jesus. The truth comes out. She's a barren witch who stole my grandbaby's heritage. No. I shouted, standing up, my hand slamming onto the desk. That is scientifically impossible. I underwent the extraction. I saw the embryos. I felt them kick. I delivered them. Maybe you carried them, Marcus spat, but they aren't yours. You tricked me into raising some stranger's kids. You breached our contract. This is fraud. This is grounds for immediate divorce and full custody for me. You'd better sit. Dr. Stevens interrupted. He wasn't talking to Marcus. He was talking to me. Dr. Opera, please. Sit down. I sank into the chair, my world dissolving. How? How could my own children not be mine? Had the IVF clinic made a mistake? Had they implanted the wrong embryo? Was I just a surrogate in my own marriage? There is one other thing, Dr. Stevens said. He turned to his computer screen. When we got the exclusion result for you, we ran a wider search. We ran the children's DNA against the national database to see if we could find the actual biological mother. We thought perhaps there was a mix-up at the fertility clinic 10 years ago. And? Marcus demanded. Who is the real mother? We'll sue her too. We found a match, Dr. Stevens said. His face was ashen. A perfect 50% match. The biological mother, she exists. He turned the screen toward us. The biological mother of your children is not a stranger, Mrs. Caldwell. He pointed to a name on the screen. The biological mother is your twin sister. The silence that followed was absolute. I don't have a twin sister, I whispered. I'm an only child. According to your medical records, yes, Dr. Stevens said. But according to this DNA, your children belong to your sister. A sister you say doesn't exist. Marcus looked at me, his eyes narrowing. Another lie? You have a secret sister? You used her eggs? I don't. I screamed. I don't have a sister. Then, a memory hit me. A cold, sharp shard of memory from my childhood. My mother, on her deathbed, delirious with morphine, whispering something I had dismissed. The other one, we lost the other one, inside. I looked at the doctor. My hematologist brain, fueled by adrenaline and terror, made the connection. The rarest condition in medical history. Chimera, I whispered. Excuse me? Marcus snapped. Chimerism, Dr. Stevens nodded, looking at me with a mixture of pity and scientific awe. It's the only explanation. You absorbed your twin in the womb, Maya. Her DNA, her genetic code, it didn't disappear. It fused with yours. You are two people in one body. That's sci-fi garbage. Marcus yelled. She's lying. It means, I said, my voice trembling, that while my blood and my skin test as me, my ovaries, the eggs I produced, they carried her DNA. My unborn twin's DNA. I looked at my husband. I am the mother. But genetically, I am their aunt. It was the truth. It was the only scientific answer. But as I looked at Marcus, I saw that the truth didn't matter. He didn't care about the science. He didn't care about the miracle. He saw an opening. He saw a loophole. So, Marcus said slowly, a cruel, calculating smile spreading across his face. So, legally, scientifically, you aren't their mother. Marcus, don't, I warned. You aren't their mother, he repeated, louder. The test says 0% match. You have no genetic claim to my children. He turned to Ms. Etta. Ma, call the lawyer. Call the shark. We don't just have grounds for divorce. We have grounds to strip her of all parental rights. She's a genetic stranger to them. You can't do that, I said, standing up. I bore them. I raised them. But they aren't yours, Marcus hissed. And I have the paper to prove it. You're just the incubator. And your lease is up. He grabbed the results. He grabbed his mother's arm. And he walked out of the clinic, leaving me sitting there with the doctor, a medical marvel, and a mother who had just been erased by her own DNA. But Marcus had made a mistake. He thought this was just about biology. He thought this was the end of the story. He didn't know that my hidden secret suspense wasn't about my twin. It was about the clinic. Because as I sat there, staring at the DNA report, my eyes drifted to the bottom of the page. To the data on the father. Marcus was the father. 99.99%. But there was a marker. A genetic marker listed under hereditary traits. Trait, sickle cell trait positive. I am a hematologist. I know Marcus's blood. I have treated him. Marcus does not have the sickle cell trait. I checked his file years ago. He is negative. Which meant, the man who provided the sperm for that sample, the man who tested as the father, was not Marcus. The man who walked out of that room wasn't the biological father either. Someone had faked the paternity test. And I knew exactly who had the access, the money, and the motive to do it. I looked out the window at Ms. Etta getting into the car. The counterattack was just beginning. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting against the cold sweat on my skin. Trait, sickle cell trait positive. The line on the report burned in my mind. Marcus did not have the trait. I had screened him myself 10 years ago before we started IVF. He was negative. Which meant the DNA in that sample, the DNA that matched my children 99.99%, did not belong to the man who had just stormed out of the clinic claiming victory. My husband wasn't the father. But he thought he was. Or did he? He had demanded the test. He was so sure. Unless he knew he wasn't the father, and he had swapped the sample? No. That didn't make sense. If he knew he wasn't the father, why demand a paternity test that would prove it? Unless he swapped the sample with the actual father's DNA. But why? The scientist in me took over. The weeping mother was shoved into a mental locker. I needed data. I drove straight to my hospital, bypassing my office and heading to the archives. I pulled Marcus's old medical files. I double-checked. Marcus Caldwell, sickle cell, negative. I pulled the kids' files. Leo, negative. Zara, positive. Zara had the trait. She had inherited it. Not from me, I am negative. And not from Marcus. She inherited it from the donor. The man who provided the sperm for our IVF cycle 10 years ago. Marcus had told me he gave the sample. I was in the other room, prepped for retrieval. I never saw him do it. I needed to find the donor. This was my counterattack. I couldn't use the official hospital labs, Marcus would see the insurance ping. I went to the private research lab in the basement, where my friend and colleague, Dr. Sarah Jenkins, ran the genomics program. Sarah, I said, walking in, I need a favor. A quiet one. And I need it fast. I handed her the PDF of the paternity report I had scanned. I need to run a familial match on this profile against the local database. I need to know who the father is. Sarah looked at the report, then at me. Maya, this says Marcus is the father. The report lies, I said. Run it. While Sarah ran the algorithm, I went home. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kids were gone. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. Marcus! I screamed, running up the stairs. He was in the master bedroom, throwing my clothes into garbage bags. Ms. Etta was sitting on my vanity stool, directing him. Get the shoes, son. The expensive ones. We can sell those. Where are my children? I demanded, standing in the doorway. Marcus looked up, a sneer on his face. My children are at my mother's house. They're safe. Away from the woman who lied to them for 10 years. You have no right, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I have every right, he shouted, throwing a dress at me. I have the DNA test. You're a genetic stranger. You're nothing but a surrogate who overstayed her welcome. My lawyer is filing for emergency custody in the morning. You are evicted, Maya. Get out. I'm not leaving, I said. Then I'll call the police, Ms. Etta said, smiling her viper smile. I'll tell them you're trespassing. I'll tell them you're unstable. Who do you think they'll believe? The father, or the woman who isn't even related to them? They had me. Legally, right now, I was on shaky ground. The chimerism diagnosis would take time to explain to a judge. In the meantime, they would take Leo and Zara. I needed to stall. Fine, I said, playing the defeated woman. I'll go. Just, give me until tomorrow. To pack properly. Marcus laughed. You have until noon. Then I changed the locks. I grabbed a bag of clothes and left. I didn't go to a hotel. I went back to the lab. Sarah was waiting for me, her face pale. Maya, she said. I found him. Who? The father. The biological father. It wasn't a random donor match, Maya. It was a direct hit in the system. She turned the screen. It's Julian. The room spun. Julian Vance. Marcus's best friend. His business partner. The man who had been the best man at our wedding. The man who came to every barbecue, every birthday party. Uncle Julian. Julian had the sickle cell trait. I remembered now. He had mentioned it once, casually. The pieces slammed together with the force of a car crash. 10 years ago. The IVF clinic. Julian had driven Marcus to the appointment because I was already there. Marcus didn't give the sample. Julian did. Marcus knew. He had to know. But why? Why would a man trick his wife into having his best friend's babies? Money, I whispered. What? Sarah asked. The Caldwell Trust, I said, the realization making me nauseous. Ms. Etta's father, he left a massive trust fund. But it had a stipulation. It could only be accessed by a male heir who had biological children. Marcus. Marcus must be sterile. He couldn't have kids. So he couldn't get the money. So he used Julian. He staged the IVF. He duped me. He duped the clinic. He used Julian's sperm to impregnate me, so he could pass the kids off as his own and unlock the millions. And now? Now, he didn't need me anymore. The kids were 10. The money was secure. He wanted to replace me with a younger, more obedient model, and he was using my own biology, the chimerism, to kick me out without a dime. He was going to raise Julian's children, with my money, which he had undoubtedly commingled with the trust, and erase me from existence. He thinks he's the father, I said, a cold smile forming. He thinks he pulled it off. He thinks the DNA test confirmed him because he put Julian's name on the sample vial 10 years ago, or he swapped the labels today. He doesn't know I saw the sickle cell marker. He doesn't know I know. I looked at Sarah. Print it. Print everything. The Julian match. The sickle cell data. And print the chimerism study. What are you going to do? I'm going to a dinner party, I said. I picked up my phone. I called Marcus. Marcus, I said, my voice trembling just enough. What do you want? Begging won't help. I know, I said. I want to say goodbye to the family. Properly. I'm leaving town. I want to host one last dinner. Tomorrow night. You, Ms. Etta, and Julian. Julian? Marcus asked, suspicious. He's the godfather, I said. He should be there to help with the transition. To help the kids. Marcus paused. He loved an audience. He loved the idea of me, defeated, serving him one last meal while his best friend watched. Fine, he said. Tomorrow. 7 p.m. But after dessert, you leave. Forever. Agreed, I said. Oh, and Marcus? Make sure Julian comes. It's important. I hung up. The hidden secret suspense was loaded in the chamber. Marcus thought he was evicting a genetic stranger. He had no idea he was inviting the real father to his own execution. I spent the next 24 hours preparing. Not food. Evidence. I hired a private courier to deliver a package to Julian's office. A package containing a single, sealed envelope marked, "Your children." I wanted Julian rattled. I wanted him walking into that dinner wondering if the secret was out. 7 p.m. came. The house was tense. Marcus sat at the head of the table, looking like a king. Ms. Etta was next to him, looking like the Queen Mother. Julian sat across from them, looking pale, sweating slightly. He had received the package. I walked in from the kitchen. I wasn't wearing an apron. I was wearing my best suit. I didn't bring food. I brought a projector. "What is this?" Marcus demanded. "Where's dinner?" "The menu has changed," I said, setting the projector on the table. "Tonight, we are serving truth." I locked the dining room door. "Sit down, Julian," I said, my voice sharp. Julian sat, his eyes darting between me and Marcus. "You wanted a DNA test, Marcus," I began, standing at the head of the table. "You wanted to prove that I wasn't the mother. And you succeeded. You found a 1 in a million medical anomaly. Chimerism. Kudos." Ms. Etta snorted. "Fancy word for fraud. But," I continued, ignoring her, "in your haste to erase me, you forgot to check your own math." I turned on the projector. The image of the DNA report, the father section, filled the wall. "Trait, sickle cell positive," I read. I looked at Marcus. "You don't have the sickle cell trait, Marcus. We both know that." Marcus froze. That's a typo." "Is it?" I clicked the remote. A new slide appeared. A side-by-side comparison of the children's DNA and Julian Vance's DNA. Match, 99.99%. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt like it could crush bones. Marcus looked at the screen. Then he slowly, robotically, turned his head to look at his best friend. "Julian," he whispered. Julian put his head in his hands. "You knew," I said to Marcus. "You knew you were sterile. You needed the trust fund money. So you asked Julian to be the donor. You staged the IVF. You lied to me. You lied to your children. You lied to the world. I did what I had to do for this family." Marcus roared, standing up, his face purple. "I secured our legacy." "No," I said. "You secured Julian's legacy." I looked at Ms. Etta. She wasn't looking at Marcus. She was looking at Julian, her eyes wide with a greedy calculation. She didn't care about the lie. She cared about the bloodline. "But here is the part you didn't calculate, Marcus," I said softly. "The trust fund." I clicked the remote again. A copy of the Caldwell Trust legal document appeared. Section 4, Paragraph 2, in the event that the heir, Marcus, is proven to be infertile or without biological issue, the trust shall dissolve, and all assets shall revert to the designated secondary beneficiary. Marcus stopped breathing. Who is the secondary beneficiary?" Ms. Etta croaked. I clicked the remote one last time. The name on the screen was not a family member. It was a charity. The United Negro College Fund. "You don't get the money, Marcus," I said. "And because the children aren't yours, you don't get the money either, Julian." I smiled. "And since I am the only one here with a clean criminal record, I suspect the courts will be very interested in who gets the children." Marcus looked at Julian. Julian looked at Marcus. The alliance of 12 years shattered in an instant. "You told me the trust was ironclad." Julian shouted at Marcus. "You told me if I gave you the sample, we'd split the money when the kids turned 18. "Shut up." Marcus screamed. "Shut up, you idiot." He admitted it, I said, holding up my phone. Voice memo recording. If I gave you the sample. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. That's biological theft. I looked at my husband. You wanted a divorce, Marcus? You wanted me out of the house? I walked to the door and unlocked it. I'm leaving. But I'm taking the kids. And I'm taking this recording to the trustee of your father's estate. I opened the door. Oh, I added, looking back at the three ruined people at the table. You'd better sit and wait for the police. The police did not kick down the door. They didn't have to. I had unlocked it moments after my warning. But in the dining room, time seemed to have stopped. The image of the Caldwell Trust document glowed on the wall, the words "revert to the designated secondary beneficiary" hanging over Marcus like a guillotine blade. You're bluffing, Marcus whispered, his voice trembling. He looked at Ms. Etta. Tell her she's bluffing, Ma. The trust is ours. We verified it. You verified it based on the assumption that you could hide the truth, I said, standing at the head of the table. But biology is a stubborn thing, Marcus. You can fake a paternity test result to fool a lawyer, which I know you did, bribing that technician to swap the sample, but you cannot fake the blood in my children's veins. I pointed to the screen. Sickle cell trait. It is a genetic fingerprint. It proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that you are not the father. Julian is. And because Julian is the father, you have violated the primary clause of your grandfather's trust. No. Ms. Etta shrieked, standing up and knocking over her iced tea. That money belongs to this family. It belongs to us. Not anymore, I said calmly. I sent the DNA results, the real ones, and the recording of your confession to the Trust's board of directors an hour ago. They have already initiated the dissolution clause. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen changed. It showed a live news feed from a business channel. The ticker at the bottom read, Caldwell Estate announces historic $50 million donation to United Negro College Fund following trust dissolution. The color drained from Marcus's face so completely he looked like a corpse. 50 million. He choked out. Gone, I said. Well, not gone. It's going to send thousands of underprivileged kids to college. Kids who actually earn their futures. Unlike you. Julian, who had been silent, suddenly lunged across the table. He wasn't attacking me. He was attacking Marcus. You told me it was foolproof. Julian roared, grabbing Marcus by the lapels of his expensive suit. You said if I gave you the sample, we'd be set for life. You promised me 10 million. Get off me. Marcus screamed, swinging wildly. It was a pathetic display. Two grown men, partners in crime, tearing each other apart over money that was already gone. Ms. Etta was wailing in the corner, clutching her pearls, mourning her lost fortune. Gentlemen, a deep voice boomed from the doorway. The fighting stopped. 3 uniformed officers and 2 detectives stood in the entry to the dining room. Behind them was my lawyer, a woman named Fiona, who looked very pleased. Marcus Caldwell, the lead detective said. Julian Vance. You are both under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and violation of the Uniform Parentage Act. He looked at Marcus. And we're adding a charge of filing a false police report and attempted extortion regarding your wife. As they cuffed Marcus, he looked at me. His eyes were wet, red, and filled with a terrifying mix of hatred and regret. Maya, please, he begged, the arrogance finally gone. The kids, they're innocent. Don't let them take the kids away from me. I'm the only father they've ever known. I walked up to him. I looked him dead in the eye. You aren't a father, Marcus, I said softly. A father protects his family. You used them as a key to a bank vault. And when you thought the key was broken, you tried to throw it away. I looked at Julian, who was being led out, head hung low. And you, I said. You sold your own flesh and blood for a payout. You don't deserve them either. They were dragged out of the house, leaving Ms. Etta alone in the dining room. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. You think you've won? She hissed. You're still a genetic freak. You're still not their mother. The courts will never give them to a chimera. I smiled. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thick file. Actually, Etta, I said, that's where you're wrong. While you were plotting to evict me, I was meeting with the leading geneticists in the state. I tossed the file onto the table in front of her. It's called a maternity declaration via gestational proof. The courts are already aware of my condition. Since I carried them, birthed them, and have raised them, and since the biological father is a criminal fraudster, the judge has already granted me full, emergency sole custody. I leaned in close. Get out of my house, Etta. You have 10 minutes before I call the cops on you for trespassing. And unlike your son, I don't bluff. The resolution was total. Marcus and Julian were convicted. The fraud against the trust was massive, and because it involved interstate wire transfers, it was federal. They were sentenced to 8 years in prison. The Caldwell fortune, the thing they had destroyed their souls to get, was gone, distributed to students who would do more good with it in a year than Marcus would have in a lifetime. Ms. Etta ended up in a small, state-subsidized apartment. I heard she tells anyone who will listen that her daughter-in-law is a witch who stole her family's legacy. No one listens. But my legacy was not about money. It was about the truth. I did not start a foundation. I did not write a book. I went back to work. But I changed my focus. I used my experience, and my medical marvel status, to launch a new division at the hospital, the Unit for Genetic Anomalies and Familial Ethics. I specialize in helping families who don't fit the standard boxes. I help fathers who have been duped, mothers with rare conditions, and children caught in the middle of biological mysteries. I use science not just to cure, but to clarify. To protect. I became the expert witness that I wished I had in that clinic. And as for Leo and Zara? We sat down, a month later. I explained it to them. Not all of it. Just the parts that mattered. I am your mom, I told them, holding their hands. In every way that counts. And in a special, secret way, too. I have a little bit of my sister inside me, and she helped me make you. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide. So, like a superhero? I laughed, tears streaming down my face. Yes, baby. Exactly like a superhero. They didn't care about the DNA. They didn't care about the trust. They cared that I was there, making pancakes on Sunday, helping with homework, and loving them fiercely. Marcus had tried to define family by blood and bank accounts. He learned the hard way that family is defined by who stays when the money runs out. I stayed. And I won. What this story teaches us is that science can tell you what you are, but it can never tell you who you are. And if you try to use nature to trick the truth, nature will always, always fight back. If you believe that love is thicker than DNA, hit that like button. And subscribe to this channel, because we have more stories of the truth coming to light, no matter how deep it's buried. We'll see you in the next one.